Hello, welcome everybody. So today again we have the next session with Dr. Ashwini on positive mental space, and today's topic is setting boundaries. She has been giving us amazing sessions in the past few months. So she is the founder of Mukta Foundation in Bangalore. She works with women who have experienced very traumatic incidents, and she helps them rehabilitate, and she has been working with burn victims and rape survivors and other women who have gone through traumatic experience. So in case anybody would like to help Mukta Foundation monetarily, we would be happy to share the phone number as well as the email ID of Dr. Ashwini and Mukta Foundation, and please you can contact her and donate money, or can find out how we can be of help for the foundation to help women. So I welcome Dr. Ashwini for the session.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So we begin? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, great then. So thank you so much for being here. I know all of you are joining from different time zones, and I think this is the fourth time I'm getting to, interact with all of you. So from what I'm able to sense, a little bit of Malayalam now, I can catch up. It looks like that.
Oh, no.
That's good. Another step. Yeah.
Well, that's nice that, I remember the first time, hardly couldn't understand a thing, but today I understand something about the temperature, so I don't know. So it's nice to be interacting with all of you. I know some of you have joined the previous 3 sessions as well, but from what I understood, some of you are joining for the very first time. So there are going to be certain topics that we have discussed that's still going to be relevant to what we are going to discuss today. So just in case, I take a topic for granted thinking that, we've already discussed, please feel free to let me know. And if you weren't there for that session, and I can always, revise it so that we're all on the same page. Would that be okay? So vaguely, I know exactly you may not remember all that we've discussed so far. If there are certain words and concepts and themes that you remember that we've been discussing, would you like to just recollect it? Because we have one more session left. I want it all to get tied up. Don't worry about, something technical, but generally, what do you remember?
Assertiveness.
Assertiveness, Reshma ma'am remembers assertiveness. I'm very glad. So we discussed assertiveness on a continuum. No? Do you remember the other 2 that we were constantly comparing assertiveness with?
Submissiveness.
And what is the polar opposite of submissiveness?
Aggressiveness.
Yes.
Yeah.
So glad, aggressiveness. This makes me a happy, a trainer that we have these words. See, why I'm asking all of you to recollect this, think about it, even to set and defend boundaries. These very skills are going to be very, very relevant. Yeah, that's why. So good that you remember this. Any other topic that you remember? Do you remember anything? Self-awareness, I think that's how we began. Yeah. Emotional intelligence, do you remember?
Yes.
Cognitive distortions.
Yeah.
This is like the teacher in the school, when I'm telling you, like, yeah, we did that. Good then. So let's begin with today, because some of you are like, hey, this sounds like, recollection class, and I don't remember. I don't want you to drop out. So let's begin today's session, and that's going to be on boundaries. Now think about it. The reason why boundaries are important, it could be as simple as someone making an attempt to attend these sessions. The number of times I've heard people say, you know what, I wanted to attend a session, but I couldn't make it because there was something happening at home. I did tell my family members that I want this 1.5 hours to learn, but something took over and I just could not make it. Now you see what's happening. Can you think of the type of boundary that maybe I'm not able to set? Let's not blame it on others that they did not allow me to, attend a session. But what type of boundary may not, allow a person to carry out what they plan for? I'm looking at something that starts with T. Imagine I think that I need to exercise today, but somehow I just don't end up exercising.
Is it time managed?
Time-related boundaries, isn't it? The technical term is called temporal boundary. It's called temporal boundary. A lot of times, we won't end up doing what we want to do. It could be in the matter of self-care itself. For all you know, because somewhere I have not set temporal, related boundaries, maybe within my own self. So therefore, today what we will do is we will reflect on boundaries, not just from an interpersonal perspective. Meaning, I tell my child, you know what, I want my time to exercise. And maybe the child comes and tells, no, mama, I want you to be with me, or, is asking something. Now that boundary is interpersonal in nature. But a lot of times for our own mental health and for our holistic well-being, it's not just about setting interpersonal boundary, but actually an intrapersonal boundary. What do I mean by intrapersonal boundaries? Sometimes we've not set boundaries in our own mind, and we don't honor our own boundaries that we have set. Sometimes, let's say, I've heard people say, every month I promise myself I wouldn't use credit cards excessively, but I end up swiping a lot more than what I have planned for. Now, you see, this is not an interpersonal boundary. It's not happening between people. Instead, I'm setting a boundary within my own brain, and then I'm ending up violating it. So today, when we are talking about boundaries, right, we will talk about it from intrapersonal. Are you all clear with this term, intrapersonal? Intrapersonal is within my own self, I'll violate. Sometimes it could be things like, every new year, maybe we set a resolution and within 10 days, if we are forgetting. Now, that's not an interpersonal. It's not an issue between people. It's an issue within the person. So we will talk about boundaries from both the perspective. Would that be okay, everyone? Yeah.
Yes.
Because many times, even if you look at the existing literature, the moment you type boundary, it's always between people.
Yes.
But then for an effective management of boundaries between people, and it could be our family members, our colleagues, our acquaintances, our, peers, whoever they are, for an effective management of boundaries between people, first, let's see, are we those individuals who also honor boundaries that we set within our own selves and for our own self? Would that be okay? Yeah. Now, just before I share the screen, I just want to begin asking you all, when I say boundaries, what other synonyms, or other terms that you are able to think of, when I'm talking about boundaries, so that we are all on the same page on this particular topic. Any other word that you can think that describes the word boundary?
Space.
Sunita ma'am, I can't hear you. What did you say?
Space.
Space. Okay. You're looking at, boundary, something about space. We all end up sharing space. To what extent am I respecting other space? Fantastic. So the first word that we have that Sunita ma'am associates with boundary is the space. Wonderful. Any other word? Okay, let me play hangman with all of you. I'm looking at a 5-letter word that starts with L and ends with a T. I hope my spellings are all right.
Limit. Limitations.
Yes.
Limit.
Wonderful. The limit that you set, isn't it?
Yeah.
Think about who said limit. Was that Sunita ma'am or
Yeah.
Reshma ma'am?
Sunita.
Yeah.
No, Sunita.
Okay.
Yes.
Look at that. Look at that. The word boundary is also related to the word limit, no? Be it time-wise, or it could be financial, or earlier the word that Sunita ma'am was sharing was the space. What's the limit that I set with respect to the physical space itself? Maybe a colleague, I'm not comfortable they getting to my physical space so closely. Have I set a limit? Think about it. Yeah. So limit. Any other word? Any other word? So we have space. We have limit. Any other word that you can think? See, the reason why I'm asking is, imagine I set a limit in my brain, but have I communicated it to the other person? So imagine any organization or between people, I know what the limits that I have set, but have I communicated? So whenever we communicate the limit that we have set to the other person, it then becomes a contract, isn't it? Think about it. There are times that a person might say, but I didn't even know that I was not supposed to call you at this hour. What does that mean? That means we had set a limit, but then we had not communicated it. But then when the person did not act based on the limit that we've set in our own mind, we felt violated. So today, I want you to please know, for an effective boundary management, there are 6 aspects that we need to be aware of. One is, do I set boundary? After setting, do I communicate the boundary? After communicating, when it's getting violated, do I defend the boundary? We are setting everything, but we also want people to recognize those boundaries, no? And respect it. And when I'm trying to defend it, they should also be willing to rectify it. We will go step by step. But I want you to know, I know the title we just said setting and defending, because all the 6 words we couldn't put it in the title, but it's not just setting and defending. Listen to this. It is setting boundary, communicating boundary, defending boundary from our side. From our side, what are the 3 steps? One is, have I set it in my mind? Whatever I have set it, did I communicate it to the other person? And if at all it's getting violated, do I simply keep quiet about it, or do I also defend it? That is from our side. Now, from the other person's side, whoever it is, it can also reverse. Yeah. Do I have the skills to recognize the boundaries set by others? Sometimes we might be so good at setting our boundaries, but we don't have the skills to recognize boundaries set by others. Imagine we have discussed people who are on the aggressive side. Aren't they good at setting their own boundaries? They'll set nicely their boundaries, but they can't recognize others' boundaries. And do I have the skill to respect it? And if at all, and I want you to be very aware of this, which is sometimes did somebody say something? I thought someone said something. I think the voice came from Luna's iPhone 8.
Sorry about that.
Okay, that was unintentional. All right, no problem. Yeah, but I hope all of you are there, yeah, in this conversation. So you see, it's quite possible. Let's not label people good or bad, but sometimes with all the awareness, we might still violate someone's boundary, let's say. But when the other person says that, you know what, I'm feeling violated, do we have the skill to rectify? So we will look at all these 6 aspects. Would that be okay, everyone? So now with this, I'm going to begin sharing my screen, and I hope you're able to, see it. Are you able to see it?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah,
All right,
yes.
sure. Look at this. Boundaries are the limits to the relationship between people. Whatever be the nature of the relationship, there shall always be limits, isn't it? It could be even an intimate relationship with our spouse. Are we telling there will never be limits? There shall always be limits, which at least in an intimate relationship on a daily basis, it might keep changing. So whenever we're talking about boundaries, let's be very clear. It is about the limits that we set. And what do these limits do? These limits should provide a safe connection to fulfill the objectives of the relationship. Be it in a personal relationship or a professional relationship, or it could be acquaintances. The limits are extremely important so that we share a safe connection. It could be a personal connection or a professional, the connection. Now, the second slide, this is going to form the framework for everything that we are going to talk about. I'm okay if you take a screenshot of it, but these words are absolutely essential. I'll tell you why. Some of us might be excellent in setting boundaries. In our mind, we've set boundaries, but we've not communicated it. Imagine some of us will communicate the boundary, but when it's getting violated, we don't defend it. Now, I'll give you one example. You tell me what's happening. Imagine you're a mother, and you've told your child, look, the next 1 hour, I need to exercise. If you have any question or anything you want to ask, it's going to be the other parent. And you also told the other parent, look, this 1 hour, I only exercise once in a blue moon. But today when I have decided to exercise, please, for just 1 hour, take care. What just happened? You think, later we'll discuss. Now you began the exercising with all full, the spirited, the exercise regime. 10 minutes into, the practice, your child comes and tells, oh, mommy, you know what? I just remembered regarding the homework or the project that I have and I need your help. Without even further discussion, you drop the entire idea of the exercise. It almost looks like you were waiting for someone to come and call you. You just go and then start helping the child. Now you tell me, what just happened? Using the words that you see on the first half, not the other one.
You couldn't defend the boundaries which you have set.
Absolutely. In this particular case, in your brain, you had set it. You had also communicated. You went one step ahead and then you had communicated the boundary. Not for a lifetime that, every time I'm going to exercise, don't disturb me. You did not even set a boundary for a lifetime. Just one time you set the boundary. But when it got violated, and the word is violated only, even though it might sound quite, heavy a word, the child did not respect your boundaries. You did not defend it even for a minute. Now you tell me, what's the child likely to think? Arey, mummy will communicate. The moment I go and ask, she's going to forget about it. Do you think the child is also learning to respect the boundaries you set every time you don't defend it?
No, they think it is okay.
It's not. It's okay. And what is the larger value that we are also communicating to the child? That someone will set boundaries and it's okay. Mummy, no, it's okay. So therefore, you see, I today want you to recognize where is the glitch within our own self. Do I struggle with setting the boundary itself? Or do I struggle communicating it? Or do I struggle defending it when it's violated? Are you all okay with this? Because each one would require a different skill. Now, from the other's perspective, or we will look at our own self. Do I have the ability to recognize boundaries set by others? Sometimes imagine your spouse has said, I'll be in a meeting till 11:15. 11 o'clock itself, we are calling them. That means we did not recognize the boundaries that they set. Do we respect boundaries? Have there been times people have said, I told you, why didn't you understand? That means somewhere there is a problem. And like I said, it's also a skill to rectify boundary violations. Some boundaries we have opportunities to rectify, but some boundaries, it has already become offense, isn't it? Think about sexual harassment. Sometimes the pleas like that, if I was told, I would have rectified, but it's already too late. Imagine, sometimes in sexual harassment prevention committees, there might be a person who's like, if I knew I was, the other person felt harassed, if they had communicated, then I would have rectified. But how come you waited for the person to tell they're feeling harassed? You did not know to recognize and respect. So sometimes it's already too late. So therefore, all these 6 aspects, when we manage, only then we have effectively valued our own boundaries as well as others. So therefore, we are looking at boundaries as a two-way process. Are you convinced about this? There's every other program that, I've been part of on boundaries. Only the one side is covered, which is setting, communicating, and defending. Somewhere the assumption is our boundaries matter, but we are all beings that we respect and recognize others. Sometimes actually not. Actually not. Are you all okay?
Yes.
Yeah. So your action, what is the other's response? Others' action, what is your response? Now, this is a slide that we will revisit. Okay, we will revisit. But now what we will do is we'll quickly look at areas that you struggle with. Look at this, the types of boundaries. This is something that we should all be aware of. And if we have kids, be it a very young child or an adolescent or a young adult, doesn't matter. We really have to be aware of all these types of, the boundaries. Yeah, maybe I could have asked you what are the types of boundaries, but we already have a slide. It would be wonderful if you could give examples. Yeah. Now, with each type of boundary violated, our mental health is going to suffer. Our well-being is going to get compromised. Are you all okay with us? Shall we look at the first one? What's the first type of boundary that we need to set in any relationship? Role-related boundary. Now, we will first look at the kind of role-related boundaries that could happen in a personal relationship. And then we'll go to professional. Can you think of a role-related boundary getting violated on a daily basis? Any example as a parent, as a spouse? Roles. What I mean by role-related boundaries, imagine it's 2 parents. Both of you had decided, look, this is my responsibility. The other role is your responsibility. Only in communication. Sometimes we say, only on papers, like that, only in communication. But when it comes to execution, one parent is ending up doing everything. Can you give me an example like that? Any task, anything? Or
Pretty
in your
much everything.
workplace? Pretty much everything. Pretty much everything that we discuss, it's only discussion. Somehow it's not an execution and implementation. And just imagine what happens to you. This is called role burden, isn't it? Won't there be role burden?
Yes, yes.
It's like
Totally.
sometimes this is heavy lifting, right?
Yeah.
When people say, I do all the heavy lifting at work, and they take pride in it. Have you seen? Sometimes people say, all the heavy lifting at home, I end up doing. You end up doing, that means maybe you've not set a boundary, communicated, or defended. And some people think I'm doing this. Even when my boundaries are violated, I keep quiet to just maintain peace. Peace where? Maybe you're maintaining peace between people, but within the person, can we maintain peace when there is role boundary violation? Think about it. Anything at the workplace? Have you seen some people always end up getting more work than the rest of the colleagues?
Often.
Often. That means maybe there is a role related boundary. Give me something that has, it's okay, because this is a safe, the space. And I, hope the confidentiality is, the kept between all of you, because that's another boundary. Na? Maintaining confidentiality is actually sometimes intellectual boundary. What we discuss here stays here. Yeah. Anything that has affected you, where because the role related boundary was not respected, it could even be our child. Sometimes there is a homework or something that the dad or mother could be an expert, but the child keeps coming to one parent only, which is okay, but then the role related boundary somewhere is getting blurred there. Can you give me an example? Role related boundary violation, something simple but hurtful. So when I say simple, things we've taken for granted, essentially. That's the word. Role related, gender
Cooking.
role. Cooking. Okay. Elaborate on it, Sean, ma'am. We'd all love to hear it now.
Hold on. My name is Jasmine. Let me change my name first.
Okay, you had to change the name. Is it so?
No, I
Sorry,
haven't. I haven't.
Jasmine.
So, no, it's not your fault. Sorry.
Sure.
No,
mm,
Jasmine, don't change your name. We love it.
Sean.
yeah, I mean,
Go
cooking is
ahead.
always
Something.
like, it happens so that I think as a mom, it's always you who thinks about, okay, what is the family going to eat? What is what are my kids going to eat? What's my husband going to eat? Mother-in-law, father-in-law going to eat? But I don't think the husband, sometimes they don't think about that.
Oh, sure. Now, sometimes gender roles are so deeply, the rooted. It's just taken for granted. This is it. Imagine somebody does not like cooking, not for an entire period, just for a couple of days because you're not feeling well. Others at times might feel that you're not carrying on the role. Think about it. So therefore, role related boundaries. Sometimes I've seen some, not just cooking, any other, setting a boundary that, yes, fine, I'll take up this responsibility 4 or 5 times a week, but at least 2 times it better be shared. Imagine all 7 days, all 365 days. And I know people who'll end up feeling guilty when they're not able to fulfill that role.
That's the hard part.
That's the hard part. That means, you see, you communicated to people that, look, 2 times. I mean, I'm just taking cooking as an example, because it came up. Imagine somebody said, okay, I like cooking, but I too require a break. It's a role. It's a role. I will cook, but 2 or 3 times a week, please share it, or we need to figure out another alternative. You communicated it. You also set it. But now when you are executing it, if you're feeling guilty, it's not an interpersonal issue. Instead, it's an intrapersonal issue. And do you think guilt is good for mental health? Absolutely not. Sometimes it's also called mom's guilt, no? Mother's guilt. Sometimes I hope father's guilt is also there. People who you're professionally involved, who are saying that, okay, 5 days I'm going to cook, 2 days let's share it, but then ending up feeling guilty. And the more you feel guilty, the more you try to overcompensate, and then you end up cooking a lot more than what you did before. So therefore, role related boundaries, you have clarity. There is no right or wrong here. Instead, whatever works for your well-being. If somebody looks at cooking as something that gives them, joy, it does give them joy. But once in a while, when it's not giving you joy, instead you need rest. Do you have the skills to set the boundaries? Is what we are looking at. Are you all okay with this? And even, let's say, in a workplace, how comfortable are you to set role related boundaries? Are you an employee who also work on a Sunday? That means it's not just role-related boundary, but also time-related boundary. Look at that time-related boundary. Can you think of examples of its violation? I hope nobody will tell if today you take the session beyond 7:30. 7:30 for me here, it's a time-related boundary violation. How many of you, anytime you're late, you don't even feel anything? You're late and you don't feel anything. That means you see it's the other side. Recognize, respect, So time-related boundary, one is you set it, the other one is do you also respect it? Can you give me examples of time-related boundaries? Have you seen some people, they'll call you and say, I will take 2 minutes of your time. And that 2 minutes is 20 minutes. And that 20 minutes becomes at times even more than that. These are taken for granted. Can I just speak to you for 2 minutes? And you were okay to speak for 2 minutes. But then the person took 20 minutes. And imagine that was a long day for you. Long day for you. And you were just looking at catching up, a cat nap. And there goes your cat nap, mayo break, whatever be it, because of that 2 minutes. Any other example? Time-related boundary violations?
In office, I think most of the IT people face the issue. It is never a 9 to 5 job. So they have to be available like any time of the day. So
absolutely. Think about it. There are countries in our world where a boss sends a mail beyond 5 p.m., let's say, it's an offense. And then there are certain parts of the world where the more communications we do outside the office hours, it's seen as, you're hardworking. You're someone who's committed to the organization. France, for instance, is very, very strict about it. Beyond your working hours, you cannot even communicate with your colleagues. Sometimes it is looked at as violation of time-related boundary. And I know in India, sometimes it doesn't happen. And I also know that that's not very strict when it comes to even in the US. Think about it. And research says that wherever in a workplace there are time-related boundaries, the mental health of the employees are increasing. But sometimes we don't even realize it, no? So are you someone who thinks, if I'm easy on time, then I will be liked by others? Think about it. Remember, I don't know whether it was in the second or the third session. How many of you remember accommodating teddy bear? You remember accommodating teddy bear vaguely? Did we talk about accommodating teddy bear? Someone who keeps losing to make others win. Someone who keeps giving more time, everything more, generous to others, but never willing to ask for a reciprocation. So these accommodating teddy bears, no, they are very easy on time. When I say they are very easy on time, they are very generous with their time. But they don't demand others to be generous with their time, They are always willing to. So please also look, do you have a problem with time-related boundaries? Then we have space-related boundaries. Space-related boundaries. Now, space-related boundaries, think, any example?
So many.
Many.
Yeah, because in India, I often notice, especially, when you're walking on the street, it is normal for people to come and hit you right on, right from your front. Like it is very difficult to walk through the street without being pushed or, shoved across the street. So that's
correct.
Hard.
Yeah. So what Reshma ma'am is saying also comes to the physical boundary. It does, connect there. Space-related boundary in this, the context, ma'am, is, let's say, sometimes we are in a very professional space, but then we are taking a lot of personal aspects there. Or we've entered a personal space, but we are still acting, like a professional. For example, the other day I was meeting a mental health professional and she was telling, it seems her daughter said, "Mommy, stop being a psychologist to me." You see what just happened? Whoever we are in our professional, the life, this is just an example of not having space clarity. See, here is a mother who is a psychologist acting like a psychologist with the daughter, and the daughter clearly communicated and defended. Good for her. But otherwise, sometimes it's possible that whoever we are in one setting, we take that, you know, uh, sometimes, the skills or attitude to the other setting. Yeah. Any such example? Space-related boundary. In different contexts, somehow we've not drawn the line.
I mean, asking about your personal life or how you're doing, or married life, or how things are going.
Imagine, like Sunita ma'am is saying, thanks for that, ma'am. It's a formal meeting. And out of the blue, you're asked a personal question. Space-related boundary, a little blurred. Yeah. So it could be. So I'm just giving you a broader framework, but just ask yourself, where I have a problem in setting, communicating, and defending, and where is my mental health today if I'm stressed or I end up feeling agitated on a daily basis. It is because of violation of which type of boundary. First, that recognition. Yeah. Then comes the physical boundary. A physical boundary is something that Reshma ma'am was already talking about. No? Imagine someone is not comfortable hugging. Even without recognizing it, by default, I go and hug. For all, there is a concern with physical boundary. It could be, sometimes public display of affection in an intimate relationship also. Maybe you're okay being in a particular manner in a one setting, but they're not okay in the other, but the other partner does not recognize it. So it's not just physical boundary violation, but also space-related boundary. Yeah. Or a colleague getting so close. Now, depending on the nature of the physical boundary violation, that there begins even sexual harassment perception, no? Which is going to be our the topic in the 5th session. But quite possible, right? Many a times, I don't know the terms in US, but in India we call it internal complaints committee. Every organization must have an internal complaints committee, and that organization internal complaints committee handles sexual harassment cases. Now, there we need an external member. So many times when a case comes, we have seen, difference in perception. For one person, it was sexual harassment. For the other person, that was a way of being cordial. This person is saying, yes, I just asked her out. But the other person says it was not just asking me out, but being persistent about it. And that persistence made it harassment. Now you see, those physical boundaries, for one, it is being persuasive, persistent, but for the other person, it's harassment. I once had this, maybe we will take all these more in the next session. This person was like, how else do you ask people to go on a date? You need to ask, isn't it? That's true. You need to ask people. Only then will the other person knows that you are, interested in dating. So this person is like, how else can I communicate? I just asked the person. But the other person is like, 10 times will you ask? One time it was asking, but by the time it was third or the fourth time, it became harassment. Whereas this person did not look at it as harassment, instead saw it as, that's how you prove your commitment. So you see, physical boundaries, at any point can be perceived as sexual harassment also. So we need to be very careful about it. What about emotional boundaries? Can you give me an example of an emotional boundary violated?
Teasing. Teasing can go out of control.
Absolutely. Teasing. Yeah.
Bullying,
What's
teasing.
bullying, teasing, what's a joke to you on the other person's expense is not a joke to the other person. Yeah. Or like Sunita ma'am was saying, asking personal questions at times could see, imagine so many times I've seen, imagine, a colleague asking, hey, you have puffy eyes, is everything okay? Maybe asking that in private, you are okay, but not amidst other colleagues that you're not comfortable. Maybe you and the other person are really close. Yes, there is puffy eyes. Maybe you've cried. Good that the other person recognized it. There is empathy. Empathy was there in recognition, but empathy was not there in evaluating whether the context is right to check. That also becomes emotional boundary violation. No? Yeah, you have puffed up eyes, is everything okay? And the other person is like, oh my God, you asked me in front of other colleagues, and even if I want to tell, this isn't the context. Any other such emotional boundary violations?
It could, hi, this is Priya. I just want to
Yes,
say
ma'am.
this could happen between friends if, they
Yeah.
don't know. If you're just outside, they could just say something about, your clothes. Hey,
Yeah.
something is seen. Or, I mean, they won't even care about if you're in a big setting or a
Feeling.
smaller setting. So, they don't know if you do not actually care about what the other person feels at that point.
Absolutely. Definitely, ma'am. Just I'm building on what you're saying. Sometimes have you seen when we meet after some time, there are some people who immediately check regarding the weight. Hey, you've lost weight. Hey, you've put on weight. We've met
Yeah.
after 6 months.
Yeah.
You don't even know the emotional state of the other person, and have they put on weight because of a health condition? And as soon as you see, immediately, imagine somebody says, Ashwini, you put on weight. Is everything okay? Or you put on weight, you look good. Your perception is I'm looking good because I've put on weight. But for all you know, that's not my perception. Even without checking on anything, blurting out something at times could actually be, lack of perception regarding emotional boundaries. Now, when we are learning about this, I want you to think from two perspectives. I hope all of you are doing that. No? Do I set emotional boundary? It's okay. Imagine I am someone who keeps telling things on the weight, let's say. It's okay. Imagine I've done this for someone. It's okay for Priya ma'am to tell me, Ashwini, that's one topic that I don't like being, spoken to. Now you see how you're communicating it. So do we do that, or do we simply keep quiet, put on, and hope the next time the person does not bring this topic up? And in that tension, sometimes we don't even go to that particular gathering, even though we want to. Have you seen? We don't want to meet few people because they are going to disrupt the mood, and you end up not meeting others also. But we are still not telling this person, look, the way you talk to me hurts me. That means setting boundary, communicating boundary, defending boundary, nothing happened. Of course, the other person is neither recognizing, respecting, and you are not giving an opportunity for the other person to rectify their boundary violation. Think about it. Yeah. Emotional boundary. Then comes intellectual boundary. What is this intellectual boundary? A quick example is, have you seen some? You were conversing with that person and it was your idea. But in one other conversation, they're talking as if it's their own idea. Have you met such people? And I hope you are not that person also.
Many times,
You see,
times.
sometimes we are
Yep.
talking, it's like you told that idea. And in one other conversation, without quoting you, they are talking as if it was their original idea. Then you are like, oh my God. Yeah. Intellectual boundaries regarding ideas and all the copyrights, intellectual property, all of those laws are coming from this particular idea. Reshma ma'am, any example? I see you unmuted.
Plagiarism.
Yeah. Plagiarism, absolutely. Cut, copy, paste without any guilt. Yeah, intellectual boundary. Plagiarism, telling the same thing without citing. And there are evidences to say, at least while writing, people care about intellectual boundaries. But when they're speaking, that's not even an idea. Because at least on paper, it's like it can be verified again, so they are careful. But when in conversations, it's worse. Please think, please think. The number of times you've heard your idea being spoken by somebody as their idea, what did you do? Did you spend time thinking, how can he do that? How can she do that? Worrying, but not telling the other person. That means you're not defending it well. Okay. We'll quickly move on to the next. I hope there is clarity. Resource and material boundary. What is this resource and material boundary? My things are your things are mine. Sometimes with some people. It could also happen between siblings, have you seen?
Siblings,
Sunita ma'am,
parents.
yeah,
Yeah,
siblings,
like
parents.
does copyright issues come under resource?
It's intellectual, ma'am. You know, it's also a type of resource only. But here with resource and materials, I'm looking at, have you seen whichever relationship, taking the phone without checking whether they can take your phone. And then you set some password. Is your birthday the password? And then straight away, you know, there is a password and they have unlocked it and they are seeing it. Sunita ma'am, so the copyrights, it's going to be intellectual boundary, but the resource material boundary in this case, we are looking at sometimes clothes, sometimes mobile, sometimes laptops. We live together. Sometimes, you know, I had this mother say, you know, oh my God, you know, my husband doesn't mind using my towel. Like, how? She couldn't even think, like, how can that happen? And the man is like, hey, we live together. That's okay. You know, what a big deal. But you see, and it bugs her. Imagine she has certain obsessive compulsive, you know, the concerns that's going to ruin her day. So resource material boundaries is sharing things, sharing things. Sharing things, sometimes there is no contract regarding sharing, but it's shared anyway. When it is shared anyway, we don't call it sharing, we call it violating without consent. Yeah. Any example for resource material boundary?
It's a very small example, not very serious. Kids actually grabbing the notes from their friends without permission.
Yeah, absolutely. Imagine a kid who can do that and not feel upset about it. We don't know what's going to be the way of thinking when they grow up, no? Isn't it? See, sometimes it could be as simple as give me your pencil, give me your eraser. It's not even give me, hey, you're my best friend, so it's just taken. In the same mindset, when children grow up, who are they going to be as adults? See, I mean, like Reshma ma'am said, now when a child says, you're my best friend, no, give me your pencil, it seems okay. But imagine the child does the same thing growing up, it won't seem okay. So therefore, even for children, it's very important that we talk to them about all of these boundaries. Now, the question to you is, you need not tell me, you put it on the chat mode. Your strength, I'm not concerned. You know, continue with that. What do you think is your limitation? Which boundary do you struggle setting? Which type of boundary? In your personal relationship first, and then which type of boundary do you struggle setting, communicating, and defending in your professional life? Can you please put it on the paper? And not paper, on the chat, you know, the box. See, now, how do you understand, is my boundary being violated? What has upset you? What has caused you distress? And then look back and see if this caused me anxiety, if this agitated me, think what type of boundary got violated. Reshma says, time related. Sunita ma'am says emotional. So this is you setting it. You setting it. We'll come to the other side later. So Ja ma'am says role related. Role related. Priya says role related. I take on too many things. So now imagine you are getting stressed and you know stress is high. I want you to think, is my stress high because I let some types of boundaries in my life get violated? If you ask me, I am also the role related boundary, not that. Sometimes the urge that needs to be done, this needs to be done, and all that. Sometimes we end up stresses at least. Okay, what's the extreme form of stress? I'm looking at a word that BO. Anyone? BO. It's a compound word or one word, I don't know. Burnout. See, when you're stressed, you're anxious. But when you're burnt out, there is no energy also to worry about anything. Have you seen sometimes? You get up and you're like, So therefore, any emotion, depression sometimes could be because there is some boundary violations that's happening. Anxiety, any maladaptive emotion if you're experiencing on a daily basis, please look back and see, is it because someone's violating a boundary? And then ask, someone is violating, but before that, have I communicated to them that don't violate it? And if you've not been able to communicate, ask yourself in the first place, have I even set it in my own brain? I think a couple of months ago, I was reading Michelle Obama's autobiography. Anyone who read that? Becoming, I think, Becoming. There she tells, there is this one, passage or a couple of pages. She's getting irritated because Barack Obama prioritizes his self-care and is going and gymming. He's managing everything, but he's also spending time going and gymming. She's not gymming, she's not exercising, but she's getting annoyed because this guy, you want to do professionally well also, and you want to go spend time in the gym. Now you see what's just happening there, and her annoyance is, how can you manage it? Not thinking, how can I do it? And he's very clear. He needs to go and exercise because that's the way he can manage his self-care. Now, this is all before, the presidential thing and all that. But so you can see that passage where she's talking about my mental health she does not use the word mental health, but she's getting upset because this guy can find time and does not feel guilty about spending time gymming instead of coming home and washing the dishes. But she's getting annoyed with that. Now you see what's happening. Someone was clearly setting the boundary that my gym time is important. You have all your emotional, turbulence, but my gym time is important. So I set it, I communicate it, and I'll defend it. And the only way to defending it is, come what may, I'll follow through my plan. So much so that the other person now is in a position to recognize it, respect it, and also say, oh, if he can do it, maybe I should also do it. So especially in your personal space, when you defend it, don't think that it will disrupt the relationship. For all when you keep defending the boundary that you have set and communicated, maybe the other person will also learn from you how to take care of themselves, especially with children. Are you all okay with this? I see a lot of, I don't want to say it's a South Asian thing, but in collectivistic cultures, defending boundaries is seen as ruffling the relationship. If I keep on defending my boundaries, what will happen to the relationship? Nothing will happen to the relationship. It will become a respectful relationship, at least over a period of time, not overnight. But over a period of time, it's going to be a relationship where people respect each other, not just one way. Think about it. Are you all okay? So you're talking about you have a concern setting, communicating, and defending boundaries with the things that you have mentioned. Now, I also want you to think, because of these boundaries you're not able to set, what's the dominant emotion that it's giving rise to? Think.
Frustration.
You need to. Frustration. Any other emotion that's becoming prominent? Stress, anger, sometimes silent grief. Silent grief is nobody understands me. It's grief only. There is no other word. Think which is the most challenging emotion for you? This was also the day one question that I had asked you. Which emotion do you find it most challenging to manage? And in that, retrospectively think, is there a boundary violation? And my understanding is 90% of the time there will be boundary violation, just giving rise to that particular emotion becoming unmanageable. Are you all okay with this so far? Yeah. Now we will just move on to the next one. Oh, my slide realized I've spent way too much time on this, maybe. Look at this. Now what we learned was types of boundaries. But now I want all of you to look at dimensional view of boundaries. This is between people, okay? This is a continuum. There's something called diffused boundary. There's something called rigid boundary. Diffused boundary means between people there is no boundary only. I'll give you one example. This couple married, very recently. The wife was telling this. On one hand, it's cute, but then, it was turning out to be a problem. Both of them working professionals. She would tell, anytime I tell my husband that, my God, my head is throbbing, I have a headache. He tells, oh my God, if you tell you have a headache, I feel so bad that even without realizing, I develop headache. Do you see that? So you get headache without realizing I am also developing headache. And she tells me, Mom, to begin with, I thought that was love. We share a household. I get headache. He's so upset that he also develops headache. I thought that was love. But later I realized love should be, I have a headache. I will take care of myself and make you a coffee so that your headache is relieved. Isn't that a better and more functional way of love? Now you see what was happening between them is diffused boundary. I and you shared space. You get a headache. I too develop a headache. It's diffused boundary. Rigid boundary would be what? You have a headache, that's your head, but I will put on a loudspeaker and then I'll listen to the music. That's rigid boundary. Neither of it is helpful in a relationship, no? Are you all okay with what I'm saying? See, diffused boundaries have blurred and merged. My headache is your headache. Rigid boundaries is between you and me, there is an entire wall. Your head is yours, mine is mine, and I don't even care. This is an extreme. What do you think is normal? Healthy. Can you give me a word for it? I think now it's time to make our biology teachers proud with one word that we might have learned in our 8th or 9th standard. Something about cell membranes. Do you remember a word that starts with P? There's some type of boundary. If I'm right, something we learned in the context of cell membranes. P.
Is that
What type
plasma?
of plasma? No, something related to that. P. What type? Not diffused boundary is not healthy. Rigid boundary is not healthy. There's something in between where you let what needs to be allowed, but to an extent, you also say it's still fine. It could be as simple as telling the wife, I'm sorry that you have a headache. Is there something that I could do? That's not diffuse, that's not rigid. Would it be okay? I need to listen.
Is that permeability?
Yes, I'm so happy. Thanks, Femi ma'am. It's permeable boundary. Permeable boundaries, I let what's needed, but beyond it, imagine, I'm going to give you a situation. And you tell me whether it's diffused boundary, permeable boundary, or rigid boundary. Okay. Let's say your child goes to another state for studying. Okay. And your child has clearly told mom or dad, now that I'm grown up is the reason why I'm moving out to study or to work. Daily we will connect once, or once in 2 days we will talk. That's the boundary set by the child. Now the mother, did you eat? Did you eat? Did you reach the college? Did you reach the college? Or dad, whoever it could be. And in the brain of the mother or the father, it's like, I'm not calling, I'm only WhatsApping once in 10 minutes. Now, is this a diffused boundary, permeable boundary, or a rigid boundary? Or calling 10 times back to back, and then telling, I got upset, I got worried, you weren't picking the call.
Diffused.
What's that? Diffused boundary. Yes. The child has clearly set a boundary that, I'm grown up. I will call you at 8 o'clock every day or once in 2 days. And you had agreed also. But then the next thing, diffused boundary. And have you seen sometimes the rigid boundary? When children move out, once in a week also they're not connecting. We then become, wishing people on birthday family, wishing people on New Year family. That's it. There is no other. Permeable boundaries to understand on certain days, I might have more need to talk to you. But on certain days, I know it's your exam and therefore let me not talk to you. You are fine. Yeah. So therefore, I want you to please. Okay. Now we will do this exercise. You can do it wherever you are. You need not tell me. Identify 3 people who are most important to you. Okay. Then ask yourself, with this person, do you share a diffused boundary? Do you share a rigid boundary or a permeable boundary? And now this boundary, I know it's a lot. Remember the types of boundary? You need to merge with that. Did you understand? Some of us, let's say between you and your spouse, on financial matters, maybe there is rigid boundary. Are you understanding? It's your spouse. Maybe on financial matters, you have a rigid boundary. But maybe, time-related matters, you have diffused boundary. Maybe with your child, with material boundary, you are diffused. Maybe time-related, you are rigid. I don't know. It might be working out differently. So identify 2 people and see, do you generally share a diffused, permeable, or a rigid boundary? The relationship is at its best when it's permeable boundary. But there will be stress, there will be anger, agitation if it's either diffused or rigid. I'll give an example. You tell me what's happening in this relationship. The previous night, your spouse saw you crying on some matter. The person asked, what happened? And you said nothing. That's it. Not even like, I don't want you to talk about it now. Leave it. And the next thing, the person, because you were crying in one room, the person went to the other room and started to sleep and snore. What type of boundary was that?
Rigid.
Absolutely rigid boundary. At least twice because you were crying. It's not that you said, I don't want to talk about the topic. Give me my space. Instead, you're sobbing. The person is like, what happened? And you're like, the next thing gone. So you see that rigid boundary. Is that a healthy relationship? And the next thing you know, you're crying even harder because the person did not even check what happened. It became an additional point for, the concern. Diffused boundary would be what? Sometimes I've seen this between siblings. Yes, Reshma, ma'am, go ahead.
Yeah, so when the person says nothing and they want that space, give them that space because they might be trying
Correct.
to,
Yeah. Now that's permeable boundary.
Yeah.
That's permeable boundary. But what would be diffused boundary?
Trying to smother them with too much of care.
Absolutely. Sometimes I've seen siblings and best friends. This is called empathetic distress, not empathy. I'm so empathetic towards you. Now, what emotion you're feeling, I'm also feeling. Now, we need a third party to take care of both of you. So, diffused boundaries, the boundaries have blurred so much. My grief has become your grief. Now, the third party should come and take care of both of your grief. Even as psychologists, right? Earlier, we used to learn this. Empathy is feeling with the client. If you feel exactly like the client, who will take care of the client? All these therapists taking pride that I feel exactly, like the client, have diffused boundary. Permeable boundary is I understand what the person is going through and I will do what's necessary for that. Now that's compassionate empathy. Rigid boundaries, have you seen some doctors, they wouldn't even ask what your name is. You're just a person there with disease that I will treat. Rigid boundary. So therefore, I want you to understand in any relationship, do you have a tendency for diffused boundary, rigid boundary? If it is permeable boundary, good going, and you need to continue that way. Yeah. What are your thoughts? The people who irritated you the most, do they have diffused boundary or rigid boundary? Please put it on the chat mode. There are some who are like, a rigid boundary at least is easy to deal with because that person is not there in the scene, but diffused is way too much to handle. Do you have a personal awareness of what type of boundary annoys you the most? And with who? Think. You need not tell me who, but yeah, diffused, rigid. Think any only Lona has thought. Say, what I'm encouraging you to do is with each relationship, you need to take a stock. What is it that Reshma says you felt both? Yeah, diffused, rigid, permeable. Become self-aware. That's it. Whether it is diffused or rigid, you may have to now rethink, do I set boundaries, communicate, and defend boundaries? Are you all okay with this? Yeah. So far, what have we learned? We know what boundaries are. We know types of boundaries. And I hope, see, I don't want it to become just an intellectual exercise, just knowing types of boundaries. I want you to apply to your own self. And also look, especially children, because they're still malleable. That means take this information to the next generation. And then we've also talked about dimensional view of boundaries, diffused, permeable, rigid. Okay. Now let's look at the next topic of, look at this. I think this is a concept that I want you to be clear about. Look at these two words. There is one boundary violation. There is another boundary crossing. Some of you, maybe when, I was talking to you about you exercising and the child coming and, telling that, Mommy, you need to come. Some of you might have felt like, if we don't support children, who else will? Some of you might have already felt that. So what I want you to know, is it boundary violation? Are you letting someone violate your boundary, or once in a while you're permitting boundary crossing? Say, for example, imagine professionally, you said beyond 7 p.m. or beyond 6 p.m., I will not answer anybody's call from a colleague. You have said that. Imagine the colleague messages you today and you generally don't. All hell can break loose. There are people who won't attend the call. Have you met such people? Rigid boundaries are there. They don't. They're looking at how can you call me at 7:30? I won't. But imagine the person says, there is something that I really want to discuss with you and it's pretty urgent. And then you do pick the call. There is a difference, right? Boundary violation and boundary crossing. Boundary violation is, an example is you let anybody in any context violate it. Boundary crossing is when you think it's absolutely essential. You violate it yourself or you allow others to violate, but there is a logic to it. There is a reason for it. I want you to please, some people after boundary setting training will become so rigid that everything is violation. It's okay that we cross boundaries once in a while for a reason. But when that crossing becomes a habit, then it becomes a violation. You set your boundaries, communicate, defend it. But once in a while, when you don't defend it because you understand the reason, then it's not boundary violation. Instead, that's boundary crossing. But you cannot trick yourself. Some people, they'll also trick. Hey, this is boundary crossing. It's needed. No. Boundary crossing will only happen once in a while. And after you cross the boundary, you don't feel miserable. Instead, you feel okay with it. You feel comfortable. Boundary violation, you'll always end up feeling miserable. Can you give me a situation where we end up crossing a certain boundary? And that's not violation. Instead, that's a necessary crossing. Can you give me an example? Maybe with physical boundary itself. Can you give me an example of a boundary crossing with physical boundary? I'm asking this because sometimes physical boundary is so essential. Let's say we don't touch a colleague, but sometimes we may have to for some reason. I don't know what the reason is. Let's see whether we can come up with something. If someone has fainted, let's say. Someone fainted. Are we still going to tell we're not going to touch the person? No, that's not boundary violation, but that's boundary crossing. Yeah, like that, can you take up one, the boundary, the type of boundary that we've learned, role-related, time-related, emotional, physical, material, and then tell me it's not a violation, instead it's a crossing. Think.
If a colleague calls you after office hours, probably for some emergency or help.
Yeah. And you don't look at it as a violation, instead it's a crossing. Yeah. Especially in sexual harassment, one of the first things, at least in India, in ICC committee, we ask is, at what time did the person message you? Because it's violation. But in the context that Reshma ma'am said, it's an emergency. It's not a violation. Instead, it's a crossing. So imagine maybe during a child's exam, we are going to be on our foot and then maybe willing to. Yeah, but every day can't be that, no? Every day can't be, Mama, last minute I'll do something. Daddy, I'll do something. Then the child is actually violating. But the crossing is, yeah, fine, chalo, it's your exam and in your stress, you just forgot. Are you all okay with this? Yeah. So boundary violation versus boundary crossing, there is a difference and let's be aware of it. Now, another thing that I want all of you to think about is which one is your strength and which is not your strength. Intrapersonal, interpersonal. Intrapersonal is your own self, decisions that we've taken. I'll exercise daily. Is that intrapersonal or interpersonal?
Intra.
Intra. Or I will take care of my emotional health. It's intra. And for that to happen, interpersonal boundary is needed. Interpersonal is telling someone that, look, I need to exercise, I need my space. That's interpersonal. But before that, we need intrapersonal. No? Say when the alarm rings and we snooze, is that intrapersonal boundary getting violated or interpersonal boundary violated?
Intrapersonal boundary.
Intrapersonal. That we cannot blame it on others. That is intra. Interpersonal would be the person says, 6 to 7, if you're exercising, who will cook? Now that's interpersonal. Yeah. Now give me examples of intrapersonal boundaries that we end up violating. Intrapersonal. Think. Give me an example of intrapersonal boundary. Anybody here would think, I need to take some classes, or I need to acquire newer skills. I need to prioritize my mental health. I need to upgrade my professional, credentials.
Setting your personal goals.
Yes, setting your personal goals. And then when we don't honor it, that's an intrapersonal boundary violated. Interpersonal is between people. So give yourself a score, 0 to 10. How much do you honor your intrapersonal boundary? You set a goal, you forgot about it, means it's not even 0, it's -1, -2. How many of us, many of us, we set goals that we forgot it the next day. Like Sunita ma'am said, setting personal goals is intrapersonal boundary only. You forgot about it means it's not even 0 on the scale, it's -1, -2. So 0 to 10. How much? Is a score of 5 to 6 good or bad? Semi, ma'am. Average. But better than 0 for sure. That means you still remember, yeah? Interpersonal boundary. There are some who will say, anything that I need to do by myself, I'll do it. But then the other people only, I can't get it done. That means your interpersonal issue is, there is a concern. Are you all okay? So I want you to think, what is your strength? What is your limitation? Are you all okay with this?
Yes.
So many people do not honor themselves. There are some people I've heard, when my boss gives me a deadline, I'll meet it. But the deadline I set for my own self, I don't meet it. If somebody else is telling, get this work done by tomorrow, I will do it. But when I tell myself I'll get this work done by tomorrow, I won't do it. That means what? I value so much the boundary set by others, interpersonal boundary, but intrapersonal boundary, I don't. There are research studies talking about, why people don't exercise and prioritize their health, because nobody else is bothered about our health. If our company says, your health, you need to take care for your promotion, then we'll take care of our health. But such a world we don't live in, no? Our health is our own priority. Therefore, sometimes we suffer. Think about it. Are you all okay with this? Now, in the last few minutes that we have, I wish to go to that first slide. You remember this slide? And we'll quickly look at what skills are needed for each one of us. Okay? For setting boundaries, what skill is needed?
Recognizing where we need to put the boundary.
Yeah. Give me a word for it. Self-awareness, isn't it? And reflection skills. To first set boundary, which is all inside my brain, I need to be aware of my needs. And I must also have the ability to reflect. Journaling you could do. Sometimes when you write your thoughts down, you suddenly recognize, hey, what are my needs? So for setting boundaries in your own head, what you need is self-awareness, reflection skills. and making time to reflect. Making time to reflect. Okay. Now, for communicating boundaries, what is needed? What skills are needed for communicating boundaries? Come on, everyone. What skills are needed for communicating boundaries?
Verbal skills.
Verbal skills. And everyone, please listen to this. To communicate boundaries, apart from the verbal skills, you also need the skill to ask for others' time. Isn't it? Unless I tell, let's say it's Femi, ma'am, I need to say, Femi, I need to discuss something with you. Can you give me some time? You could be an excellent speaker, but your skill is not in getting others' time, others' mind space. Then what good is your verbal skill? Some of us are good in speaking, but not good at getting people's time or getting people's attention. They're also gone, no? How many times in your families or somewhere people have said, when did you tell me that? You're telling that, the other day I spoke to you regarding this, right? Imagine you're telling the other day I told you, right? And the person is like, when? When did you say? I don't even remember. You spoke well, but it did not get registered in the mind of the person. Then also communication is incomplete, no? So communicating boundaries would require skills to get somebody's time and attention, and then verbal skills. Okay. Now you tell me what skills are needed for defending boundaries. Someone violated your boundaries. What skill?
Courage to speak up.
Courage to speak up. Give me a word for that skill. Somehow that word has been my favorite word throughout the series. You know the word. What's the courage to... Yes, assertiveness, isn't it? Will a submissive person defend boundaries? The definition of a submissive individual is they don't defend others' boundaries. But sometimes when others are violating their boundaries, they don't defend. Isn't that the definition of submissiveness? Aggressive people, they defend their boundaries, but they don't respect other boundaries. But an assertive person who has the courage to speak is a person who will defend boundaries when it's violated. Are you all okay? So for different things, different skills are needed, and I want you to work on it. Now we'll come to the other side. For you to recognize boundaries set by others, what skill would you require? For you to recognize boundaries set by others, what skill do you require?
Listening or observation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Femi. Yeah, you need to either listen or you need to observe. These are the only two things. Some of us maybe will recognize boundaries when people tell us. Who will come and tell, I don't want you to sexually harass me, you tell me. Instead, that's something that we must know by observing the boundaries. Isn't it physical boundaries? So what I'm telling is, maybe some of us will respect boundaries when it is told. But not always everything can be told, no? Sometimes we need to also recognize by observing. Sometimes it could be as simple as colleagues or family members, we all go to the restaurant and order. There might be a family member who does not like us taking a bite from their plate. See, it could be as simple as that, no? It could also be, a lunch out with colleagues. Maybe someone is comfortable, somebody is not. So that is an observation. So recognizing boundaries, like Femi and Sunita ma'am, Femi and Sunita were telling, it's listening and observing. What about respecting boundaries? To respect boundaries, what skills are needed? Empathy is needed, isn't it? Empathy is needed. To rectify boundary violation, what skill is needed? Somebody told that, look, when you ask me those questions, I don't like it. For you to rectify boundary violation, what skill is needed? Or what attitude is needed?
Realizing your mistakes.
Correct. And who we can only realize our mistakes and be willing to rectify if we have one attitude. Otherwise, we will justify it. No, I did not mean it. No, I don't even think you should be worried about it. The other person is telling, hey, it's an attitude. Maybe once again, we'll end it with a hangman. It starts with a H and ends with a Y. It starts with H and ends with Y. Somebody is telling, hey, you made a mistake. What is that attitude which helps us accept our mistakes and rectify it?
Honesty.
Mm-hmm. No. It rhymes with that. Humility, right? Humility is nothing but, yeah, fine, I did make a mistake. Thank you for correcting me. I didn't know it any better. Now that you told me, I'm going to change. Sometimes we don't have that, right? If we only have that, at least mistakes do happen, knowingly, unknowingly. People who commit the mistake knowingly are unlikely to be humble. But the ones who've done it without knowing, when it's brought to their notice, humility will ensure that we accept the mistake, if at all we've really made a mistake, and will also help us correct it. Think about it. And there are so many research studies which are talking about how when all these 6 set of things that we just discussed, if we can set boundaries, communicate and defend boundaries, recognize, respect and rectify, our mental health is also fine, as well as our social well-being is also fine. See, our mental health will be excellent with setting boundaries and all that. Our social health, interpersonal health will also become better if we can recognize, respect and rectify. In a way, we could say, when we follow these 6 steps, our intrapersonal and interpersonal well-being is going to improve for sure. Would that be okay, everyone? Yeah. So we'll end here. If there are any questions, now time-related boundary, I know 6 minutes have taken more. If there are any questions or reflections, please do. Otherwise, we can call it. But what we are discussing, like I said, it's an insight-driven exercise. Sometimes having these frameworks of thinking should help us reflect in a structured manner. Maybe tonight when you go to bed, just spend like 10-15 minutes in recollecting all the types of boundaries. That's asking for too much, wishful thinking that I have, that post this workshop, you will go and think about everything we've discussed. But I want you to think. Setting boundaries, communicating, defending. What am I good at? Where do I require to work on? Think, my child, does she set boundaries with her friends? Does she set boundaries with me? Think. So let's take this, awareness to the next generation also. Femi is asking this question, how to tackle that guilt from within, that guilt of not cooking for the family, or that guilt of not executing my success plan. See now, that guilt of not cooking for the family. Now ask yourself, have you clearly set boundaries? How will you set boundaries? See, in that line, not cooking for the family, I would say it's an incomplete sentence, because imagine not cooking for the family for how many days? Are you not cooking for the family because you have another, role to play? It's not that we are not taking the nutritional need of the family. Instead, I've delegated it to somebody else. See, that line itself, I'm not cooking for the family. How does that sound to our own brain? Instead, my family has a cook who understands nutrition better than me. Now, will you feel guilty? Or I can cook, But there are certain things that nobody else can do. That I will do. But that which others can do, that they can do, no? So what I'm telling, Femi ma'am, is guilt of not cooking for the family. Cooking for the family. That line is breeding guilt. Now, what is the better sentence structure? I am not cooking because there is an additional responsibility of attending to my mother-in-law who is not well. And we have a cook who takes care of cooking. You're still taking care of the family. It's just that you're not cooking. Or I am not cooking because I have cooked for many, many years. It's now time for me to, put certain other skills to good use. That is setting. Now, are you feeling guilty because somebody else is not agreeing for you to not cook? Then communication, negotiation skills. No? There might be somebody who's making you feel guilty. And that somebody sometimes could be an entire culture making you feel guilty, isn't it? As a mother, you should cook. No. As a mother, you need to take care of the family. As a mother, you need to take care of the child. But that taking care need not always be for cooking. It could be so many other aspects. No. See, imagine we've not done a diet course or something. Maybe a cook has done. When you get that cook to cook, you are taking care of the family much better than our own, all the things that you cook. Yeah. So therefore, see, the communication, you negotiate. Is there somebody who's telling, how come you don't cook at all? My sister does one job also. She has 2 children. She's cooking. You have one job and one child, you're not cooking. Is somebody making you feel guilty? Then time for communicating with that person that, you know what? I know your sister has 2 kids and cooks, but her context is different. My context is different. The sister cooks, but there is a spouse who helps in cutting the vegetables. Here, I'm not receiving that particular help. Would you like to pitch it? Then both of us can together cook. So then it's communicated. But if you're someone who set boundary, communicated also regarding cooking, but when somebody says you cook, no, that cook does not cook well, are you the one who will just like that go and cook? Then that means you're not defending it well. Then you might have not got that cook only do it on a daily basis. So therefore, please see what is the source of that guilt. But if you've decided for your well-being and for the general well-being of the family, you need not feel guilty. But you need to see where is it stemming from. Think about it. Are you all okay with this? Any other? Fine then. Thanks for that question. Fine. So I hope all of you, see, I know, or at least I'm hoping all of you are listening. But listening is one thing, but remembering is the other. Sometimes when I say, what did we discuss in the first session? And when you don't tell me, now that I begin to, I know sometimes intellectually we may not remember, but for all you know, we have taken whatever is necessary and we have implemented. I hope that's happening. Yeah, I hope that's happening. So fine then. So thank you so much, everyone. This was session 4 on setting, communicating, defending boundaries, and also recognizing, respecting, and rectifying boundaries. All the very best to all of you. And the next session is going to be on prevention of sexual harassment. And also, I know it's going to be a jam-packed session. Also, how do we support survivors? Yeah, how do we support survivors? Lovely meeting all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ashwini. On behalf of FOMAA, I would like to thank you. And I guess everybody is very, they're all trying to grasp all the information you've provided. And if there is any question, I will ask them to either communicate to you directly or they can give it to us.
Let's
we can forward it to you, Doctor. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you
yes.
so much.
Thank
And
you so much. Yeah. Take care, everyone.
you
Bye.
too. Bye. And, thank you, everybody.